New Orleans, Louisiana. A man stumbles out of a bar and, too lazy to visit an actual restroom, uses an alley wall instead. He's a cop, and feature victim number 1 walks through the alley, running into an Asian woman with a surgical mask over her mouth. "Do you think I'm pretty?" she asks. And unable to recognize a threat when she sees one, the soon-to-be dead woman mouths off and promptly gets her throat cut. The cop, done pissing about, shoots the Asian repeatedly, who runs with scissors freely, but bullets don't affect her. You'd think you would have figured that out by the first shot, but why not empty your gun clip? Sigh. Back to Liv's map of convenience. Sed struggles to induce a vision and John smokes. Wait, John smoking? Yes! Good on NBC for letting the reins loose a bit. John's fixing a zoetrope and uses it right away on his willing victim Sed. Her vision entails a boy learning how to use a gun, which cements a connection to Liv's trouble map. The blood flows afresh. In the alley where the opening scene went down, John investigates. John quickly surmises it was a spirit using a new gadget that uses colors to denote the danger rating. He gets applause for his performance by the cop who saw it all go down, Jim Corrigan. Sed spooks Jim, but he still tells his version of events. John no longer disputes his Master of the Dark Arts title. John and Sed get separate hotel rooms because he won't sleep with anyone he knows nothing about. Weird scruples, considering John himself is playing up the mysterious stranger aspect just as much as Sed. 40 miles away from New Orleans, a man picks up a hitchhiker. Didn't anyone ever tell him hitchhiking is bad? Sed has another vision of a road and watches an accident moments before it actually happens. John's all set on wiping the cop's mind to find out details, but Sed acts like a distraught sister instead. It's the third accident in the area, and Jim shows up to arrest John for reporting an accident before it happened. No thanks for the heads up? Jerk. John apparently has a bail fund, so getting arrested must be a common occurrence. Chaz has a run-in with the masked woman, and despite singing her praises, she whips his butt, getting in mortal wounds. In an interrogation room, Jim gives John some credit for knowing what's what. The masked woman is Misaki, a model who was disfigured and then committed suicide 5 years ago. The hitchhiker is Philip, who died 3 years ago. Chaz is getting medical attention and appears to be dead until he pulls a Jack Harkness. He wants to leave, but first he needs a clean shirt. At least he knows his priorities. I know they're going to explain Chaz's immortality eventually, but it still comes out of left field for me. I feel like I'm watching Torchwood every time it happens. John interviews the ex-model, now ex-felon, who disfigured Misaki, acting as a parole officer. Sed talks to Philip's grandmother at the same time, posing as a magazine writer. Both the model and grandmother visited the same man to commune with spirits, Papa Midnight. In the midst of another ritual to speak to a dead man named Clark, Papa Midnight chats up the man's wife until John crashes the party, trying to impress upon Midnight that he's doing more than just speaking to the dead. Why is it John always gets knocked out when he visits Midnight? Does Midnight have a checklist whenever John shows up, number 1 being render him unconscious? Jim visits Sed, who's keeping people off the road Philip haunts, but Jim would rather pick up the hitchhiker instead. Didn't know he swung that way. Midnight finds John was right. He is raising the dead. He realizes he'll have to work with John to fix it, but John wants more than his debt erased. He wants to question Midnight's sister, Sedella. On the road, Jim tells Sed he knows who she is, asking why she's running. Further conversation is halted as Philip appears, but he disappears just as fast. Working together with Midnight, John starts his plan. He wants to take the bodies of the 3 spirits and burn them, putting their spirits to rest. As John sets up the oh-so-fun corpse bonfire, Sed consults with him and resolves to pick up Philip again. While John and Midnight start the spell, Sed tries to communicate with Philip. The spell fails, and John and Midnight tear into each other, trying to place the blame for their failure. After having coming to blows, John realizes their mistake. Chaz confronts Misaki again, using a Whose Line Is It Anyway game, questions only, making the spirit hesitate. Clearly, she doesn't understand the pop culture reference. The guilt each person feels about the resurrected spirit is keeping them on the mortal plane, making them kill. Out of frustration, maybe? Not sure why, but I guess it's that pesky Rising Darkness influence. Midnight and John get the consent needed to make the spell work. The other 2 must have given theirs on the ride over, I guess, and the spirits dissipate, finally at rest. Corrigan lets Sed know he recognized her as she was part of a missing persons case he'd worked. He's disposed of her file, though. How nice of him, given he hasn't known Sed but for a few days. Sed sees a ghostly specter, surround Jim as he kisses her hand. Their cooperation almost over, John turns down the chance to talk to his mother and ask another question of Midnight's sister, Sedella. Her response is less than comforting. The rising darkness is being brought about by someone close to John who will betray him. The only people near him at the moment are Sed and Chaz. Continuing the upswing from last week, Papa Minette returns and another well-known DC character is introduced. Jim Corrigan is a cop who's just been given a glimpse into the supernatural world and hasn't undergone his own transformation into the Spectre. Admittedly, I'm not very familiar with the character, so I'm not sure if his characterization is correct, but I thought the writers did a great job adding him to the story. He's skeptical, but open to expanding his worldview and jumps right into it once he finds concrete facts that support the supernatural angle. I never found Corrigan's scenes tacked on, and his connection to Zed seems natural. It's quite fun seeing Midnight and John work together when it's clear they hate each other. Their styles of magic couldn't be more different, and I can sort of see grudging respect between the two towards the end. Zed is actually an asset in this episode as she tackles one part of the investigation and resolves it on her own. Her visions aren't done just for the visuals and serve a purpose, keeping the narrative flowing. The story isn't anything original, but it's done well, and though the reason why the spirits aren't at rest should have been rather obvious to John, at least he's allowed to make mistakes. 4 out of 5, and a definite sign the series has found its footing, if the last few episodes are anything to go by.